Sega Bits presents Sega Talk, a podcast talking all things Sega! With your hosts, George and Barry.
Look, it's a giant talking egg. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the master here. Say what?
Hello and welcome to Sega Talk. I'm Barry, with me is George.
Hello, everybody.
And on this episode, we're getting very heady. We're going to be talking about art, we're going to be talking about music, we're going to be talking about visuals, and I guess a little bit of gameplay in video games. So what are we going to be talking about? Well, last week we talked about Super Monkey Ball, and that was, what was that, like 2001 release?
Yeah.
And this week, usually we mix it up, but this week we're sticking with that era. This was a request from a patron, so if you support us on Patreon, you get to tell us what games to do, and we always get to them and do them ASAP. In this case, we needed an extra week to do a little more research, because as you'll see, this is a game with a lot of stuff behind it. So what's the game? It's Rez. So originally released to the Sega Dreamcast, Rez was a musical rail shooter developed by United Game Artists, directed by Jun Kobayashi, no relation to the hot dog guy, I don't think.
Yeah.
And produced by Tetsuya Mizuguchi. And the game is one of the handful of notable Dreamcast games to never receive an American release, despite releasing in Japan and Europe. So as such, Americans recognize the game as a third-party PS2 title released in 2002. And so we're going to have, I guess, like a unique American perspective on the release of this game. So when did you first learn of Rez, and when did you first play the game?
So I didn't play it on the Dreamcast. I played it after, and if I did play it, it was like burnt. I don't know if it was rare or not, but I just remember I couldn't find it. But I did play it on the PlayStation 2 after I heard stories about, well, we're probably going to be talking about this later, but there was an add-on for it that was basically, I guess, controversial and was very sexual in nature. And when I heard about it, I was like, well, I got to play this game, obviously, because, I mean, I'm a Sega fan, and it's not only a rail shooter, which I like Star Fox is one of my favorite 64 games, and Panzer Dragoon is one of my favorite Sega Saturn games, so I tracked that down to PS2 copies, so my first time is playing it on the PlayStation 2, and some people in the comments are going to call me a sellout. I mean, it's whatever. I just wish it came out here on the Dreamcast in America, but I have the American version of the PS2. What was your first time playing it, Barry?
So, every Sega fan who was a Dreamcast owner has their story of, where they went after the great death of the almighty console.
The cleansing.
The cleansing. And I've said, I think I even said last week on the last episode, I went to the PS2 and the Xbox because I was a huge Jet Set Radio fan, so I wanted to get Jet Set Radio Future. And PlayStation 2, honestly, there's nothing specific that really hooked me. It just seemed like PS2 was getting, the rest. I couldn't really nail it down at the time, but I guess looking back, it was more of the Japanese, maybe experimental games, and then the typical stuff like Virtua Fighter, the more classic Sega titles like that. And I feel like Rez was the game that really stood out to me, because I was like, Virtua Fighter, that's fine, but I don't have any friends to play with. And I'm trying to think what else Sega was releasing at that time when I was getting a PS2. It must have been this game that really pushed me over the edge. Though I don't remember knowing that it released to the Dreamcast in Japan or Europe.
Yeah, it feels like Rez had less than $0 in marketing, because even back then, when House of the Dead 2 came out, or even stuff like Cosmic, or what was that? Cosmic, what was that?
Smash.
Cosmic Smash.
Yeah.
I heard people talk about that game on the internet, but Rez on the Dreamcast, I feel like it took a while to get a cult following online, or maybe I was just talking to people that didn't really play that game. It was so strange because I feel like I only heard about the game because of that the vibrator basically that they created for it. And to me, it's like, wow, I feel like that probably sold more copies of the game than anything Sega could have done, like to promote it.
Yeah. Oh, no, for sure. And, I mean, that was very early in games, I guess, journalism. That's when we were reading a lot about video games. And so to see this kind of, like, crazy thing happening with a Sega release in the third-party era, you were like, the hell's going on? I need to check this game out. And I think, actually, I do remember, obviously, reading the news stories, but I also remember looking into how I could get the peripheral, and that's one of my earliest kind of peeks into importing.
Yeah, yes.
And because I was like, oh, you can buy this stuff, and so I think through that I got a lot of things from Japan through websites like Play Asia, and there was another one that was really NCSX. Do you remember that?
Is that the one that Sony shut down because they tried to sue them? Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. I bought Dreamcast shells, a clear Dreamcast shell from them, and I think that's where they had the transvibrator. Oh, and
yes,
and I was like, oh, they got that, and then it was gone. But yeah, and so it's, I mean, I guess I'm just kind of surprised because I know games like Headhunter and Shenmue 2. At the time, I was really upset they weren't releasing to the Dreamcast. But I guess just because there was a lack of the official Dreamcast magazine, and I don't really know if that magazine actually covered Rez. Like, I feel like Rez came so late that it was debuted, and we'll get into that, like, in the middle of 2001, and I think the magazine was, like, wrapping up at that time. So there was no real journalism covering the Dreamcast release of this game. It's not like they were doing playtests with journalists or anything. It was really kind of, the game was demoed and then it released shortly thereafter, which I guess is unique because Jet Set Radio was really being shopped around to journalists. I feel like Sega of America were really afraid that the game might flop in America, so they were giving a lot of extra time for American journalists to cover it and really play it and get to know it. Same with Shenmue.
You could definitely tell because, like, they were really pushing Jet Set Radio here. And like I said, remember we talked about in the Jet Set Radio episode about the commercials and stuff they played? It was just strange. They really tried to push that one. This one, not so much. Headhunter, not so much.
No, Headhunter just got a little bit. I guess I was just aware of it because they were like, coming soon to the Dreamcast, and it never came out. So, getting back into the development of the game, the team behind the game contained several Team Andromeda members who were known for their work on the Panzer Dragoon series. Other members of Team Andromeda joined Smilebit, and they're known for Jet Set Radio series, and later for Panzer Dragoon Orta, Jet Set Radio Future, and Gun Valkyrie. So, how do you think the Panzer Dragoon games influenced Rez? I mean, it's pretty obvious. And what connections do you see with Smilebit's gameography and Rez? And I'm asking this question because as we move on, Mizuguchi is going to have a lot. We're going to be talking about him a lot. And I think people forget that there's a team of people that worked on this as well. Yeah. And I feel like their influences did impact the game, even though this was a very personal project for Mizuguchi. So how do you think, what connections do you see between...
So, while like a game like Panzer Dragoon, obviously the rail shooting aspect, the way the crew you could hit multiple objects while you're doing it, the 360 viewpoint like you did on Panzer Dragoon. There's also like the art style was later used by Mizuguchi when he did Luminous, the puzzle game. So it's like I don't know, like the art style is obviously his. It seems like to me at least, because when he went third party after Sega, he still kind of uses that like low resolution, you're inside a machine art style.
Right.
And then, so I feel like the shooting aspect and the rail shooting maybe wasn't all his idea. Maybe he wanted to make like a music game. But it's like, oh, all these other members here, they know how to make rail shooters. So, and I have a feeling that at this time too, when you wanted like a low budget game to like have something to show, or Sega did, you would do a rail shooter. Like that's why Panzer Dragoon was a launch title, because it was they needed a game out that was 3D and it was easy to create, that you could get it out as soon as possible, obviously. So maybe that's why they didn't advertise this that much. I think during the 2000s, I think we were getting to the point where people wanted more control over their characters.
Right.
But yeah. But that's just my
Yeah.
idea behind this. But yeah, it's basically a rail shooter with music aspects to it.
Absolutely. And, if you really want to control the story and what's happening, of course you're going to stick players on a rail. I mean, we've seen that even before video games, like at Disney World or Disneyland and parks around that era in like the 1950s, they were like, well, how can we entertain people and it's not a roller coaster, And so they would still stick to that rail and they would have the story going on around them, but they had complete control of what they saw and what they experienced. And to move into gaming, we've seen that a lot with Virtua Cop, House of the Dead, rail shooters, again, rail. So in this case, with this game, I think because it's so tied to music and building to certain crescendos and portions of the songs, that there's no other way you could have done this. Like, I know, modern gaming is all about open world, but I am so sick of open world. I want a developer to hold my hand and take me through their journey. Like, I love that. And I feel like it's lost on a lot of modern games. And so that's something I really like about, Panzer Dragoon games and Rez. And I like experiencing someone else's experience and still having some control, but not complete control. So I can get to these moments where I'm like, whoa, wow. And Rez has so many of those moments, like moments that if I was just freely roaming around, I'd never get to that. I'd never see that connection. I don't know. Again, like this whole game is kind of heady, so there's a lot of just kind of game experience thoughts I'm having on this right now. I don't know. I'll get back on track, though. I'll get back on the rail.
On the rail, yes.
This game's development. So Mizuguchi, his previous works included AM3 arcade games, Sega Rally Championship, and Sega Touring Car Championship. And while at UGA, he also created the Space Channel 5 games. So what's your opinion on Mizuguchi's other games?
Okay, so I played a lot of Sega Rally Championship as a kid because it was one of those games that basically, the Sega Saturn version basically kind of came with your Sega Saturn. Like, if you had a Sega Saturn, this is probably one of the easiest games to pick up. Mm-hmm. So I played a lot of that, and I mean, it's a dirt racing, car game. It has, him as an artist. I think this is probably one of those games at the time when Sega was like, you need to make a car game. Like, I don't know if you saw that new documentary. They talked about the Dreamcast, and the guy from Crazy Taxi was like, at this time, Sega wanted just racing games. So they told him, do a game, but it has to have a car in it. Yeah. So he came up with Crazy Taxi. So I have a feeling that probably wasn't his ideal situation he wanted to make, but did it anyway, and he did a bang up job. But yeah, Space Channel 5 is more of, what he's been, coming to know as what he does, like basically a music game. He's basically a huge music nerd, and he wants to do music games with an emphasis on music. Like, even his puzzle games have an emphasis on music. So I would say that Space Channel 5 is when he got his freedom to do what he wants. And Sega Rally, while it has great music, I feel like it was just like, you haven't proven yourself. You have to make a hit kart game, and he did it.
Yeah, and you see that a lot from Sega developers. I mean, I feel like Yu Suzuki's the only one who wanted to do a racing game, like not racing, but like driving with Outrun. And whereas Nagoshi and Mizuguchi, they're working on stuff like Daytona and Sega Touring Car, and they understand the importance and how much people love those games. But I'll be honest, I don't think they really see them as personal projects. I think Daytona USA is to Sega Rally Championship as Rez is to Yakuza. You know what I mean? Like, with that much more personal connection in a game that they would have made. And it makes sense because they get further along in their careers. They have more say in what they get to do, and then they create the games that they really have been wanting to create. So it's hard to look at stuff like the Sega Rally games and say, oh, there's the connection to Rez. That makes sense. I mean, outside of being on a track, but that's racing. Like, whatever. It's a rail. It's a track.
I mean, they're both arcadey games if you think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Space Channel 5, though, I guess the only surprise I have is that it's the most cohesive, like, story with characters and a backstory and things like that. And everything else he's done that he's worked on is much more loose and heady, and there is no real concrete plot. And I think part of that might come from the other people who have worked on the Space Channel 5 games. I feel like they're not as precious to him. And I mean, I know he designed them and stuff, but I feel like just looking at the people who worked on it, like the musicians and the director, and even the writers, I feel like it was probably more personal for them or something that they really made their own. Not to discount his work on Space Channel 5, but it just, I don't know. I get that vibe. Because there's a VR game coming out for Space Channel 5, and he's not going, oh, they're ruining my creation. He's probably like, whatever, it's not my character.
Yeah, I think so too, yeah. And it feels like, obviously, like even she's, Ulala's been in so much things that pretty sure he's fine with it.
Yeah, I don't think he cares. I think he sees her as Sega's property, and that's it. So Rez was developed under the working title of K Project, and it took inspiration from Russian painter Kandinsky. So Mizuguchi, he was really drawn in by this work of this Russian painter. Do you see that influence in looking at some of the work of Kandinsky? And for people who maybe are listening to this on audio and you don't want to crash your car, Googling images, it's a lot of shapes. Yeah, shapes, colors, lines. Yeah, how would you describe it?
I feel like he kind of like it's basically low resolution graphics, right? Like wireframes and stuff. But in a style of like odd shapes around you. So I could see the influence. I mean, it's not like one-to-one influence. It's not like he tried to make it look like a water painting or anything like that. Or like a piece of artwork. But you could tell that some of the shapes he probably was like, all right, I got to look at some paintings. And I could see him becoming influenced by his paintings, but making it more low-resolution wireframe graphics. And it worked out for the game, personally. But yeah. It looks great, but I can see it. I didn't know that though until after I saw it right now. Yeah, so I didn't know he was influenced by him, but it makes sense.
Yeah, and we'll actually get into more of Kandinsky down the line. Rez is a patchwork of very strange influences, as we'll soon learn. So unlike previous rail shooters, Rez replaced traditional sound effects with music. Players would create music through their targeting and shooting of enemies, and this led to players experiencing synesthesia. And the definition is a condition in which one sense, for example hearing, is simultaneously perceived as if by one or more additional senses such as sight. Another form of synesthesia joins objects such as letters, shapes, numbers, or people's names with a sensory perception such as smell, color, or flavor. And I think I've seen something like this, like on a talk show where this person's like, you tell them their name, and then they tell you what they tasted in their mouth, and they're like, "Oh, Jonathan, that's a very chocolatey name," So there are people who are they just do it, and whereas this game was trying to get you to do it. I'm trying to think, maybe kind of like ASMR, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
where people will do that and they're like, I've never experienced this before, but I would feel things when they would speak. I get the brain tingles. So let's be honest with ourselves. Did we experience synesthesia when we played the game? And what are our thoughts on the sights and sounds of Rez?
Well, okay, so there's been a few releases where you could, I guess, have add-ons that kind of add to the simulation.
Right.
The closest, I did play it on the Xbox 360. I don't know if you played that version, but like you could use multiple controls with the vibration to get the vibrating, basically trans vibrator thing.
Yeah.
I understand what they're trying to do. I would really want to play this in like huge speakers with like high quality sound. And see if, like, you get that vibrating. You know when you go to a concert and they play the music really, really loud and then you get that bass tingle inside your body? Like, I want to see something like that. But no, I did not experience Synesthesia. And, but did you, Barry? I know you played this game a lot. It's one of your favorite games.
I didn't, no. But going along with what I was saying with the, like, Disneyland kind of theme park comparison, this game, it's an attempt to make you, if you don't feel synesthesia, it's a simulation of synesthesia. And I think that plays in perfectly with the plot of the game, which again we'll get into a little later. But it has the music, it has the visuals. Now, with true synesthesia, you would just be seeing something without actually looking at the game. You would be hearing the music and seeing things. And obviously not everyone can do that. And so with this game, you hear the music and the visuals move along with it to the point where it's not like the visuals are making the sounds, and it's not like the visuals or the music or sounds are reacting to each other. They're one and the same. And so when you're playing the game and you hear the music and you're shooting the things, you'll realize that your actions are actually lining up with the music, but it doesn't appear to be influencing the music, if that makes sense. It's almost like everything's happening at once. And that's when you get these little magic moments where you kind of feel simulated synesthesia. At least that's what I think.
It's
weird.
Yeah, you're like explaining. You could do like a whole college course on.
You could, but I guess you see movie theaters doing that. Sometimes they like pump in smells and stuff, and I'm sure there are people who could just sit back and watch a movie and just smell stuff.
Do they actually do that? I have never been one that they put smells. Can you imagine like
they do
watching The Last Jedi and then it's like, wow, this planet really does stink like crap. It's like it just smells like cow in there. That'd be weird.
It just smells like salt. The whole room just salty.
Oh, I don't know. Is that the fanboy tears when they cry on the internet?
Yeah, that is. So here we go. A lot has been written about the development of Rez, and being such a personal project of one man, there is a lot to cover. Now, I was reading a lot about this game, and I would just scroll, and it kept going, and at the end of the story it would go, and that's how he figured out to make wireframe graphics. And you're like, oh, okay. Like, did I need... And this game is... The story behind this game is like that movie Slumdog Millionaire, where you sit there for 30 minutes and you're like, what is this leading to? And it's like, oh, that's how he knows the Queen of England's name. You know? Like, yeah. It's, so I'm going to do my best to hit all the key moments, but try to keep it short. So Mizuguchi's early gaming experiences saw him drawn to games with momentum, driven by music and sound effects. In 1997, Mizuguchi was in Zurich watching a street parade at an electronic dance festival. The music combined with the sights and sounds reminded him of Kandinsky's work in that he painted sounds that he saw. So that's what Kandinsky's work was kind of all about. Kandinsky would paint sounds. And, I mean, that's Rez right there. That's Rez on canvas. And Mizuguchi combined these experiences at these music festivals with the art of Kandinsky to create what would become Rez. And Mizuguchi and his team, they visited Shibuya clubs, which is where I believe... so when when United Game Artists and Smilebit and all of these studios, don't you remember they like kicked them out of Sega's offices and gave them their own little offices? Do you remember that?
What are you talking about?
So when Sega created all of these smaller studios, they gave them their own workspaces outside of Sega. Yeah. And it was really confusing to fans because we're like, is Sega like firing all these guys and telling them to create their own company? But really it was...
I remember stories coming out on magazines where there was like, is Sonic Team going to Nintendo because of these kind of like team separations? And I remember reading stories about how maybe Sony's going to buy out studios from Sega. That freaked me out. When I was a kid, I was like, no! Because I mean, if you're a Sega fan and you stuck with the Sega Saturn, a big reason you did that was because of Sega's first party teams. But yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. And so I think the intent actually was to get them out of the Sega headquarters and out of their cubicles and really put these creatives together to create their own unique games. And so to give them their own workspaces separately, that would actually lead to stuff like for example, in this game, they relocated to Shibuya, which was much more vibrant and colorful. There were clubs. So they visited Shibuya clubs. They went to drum festivals, apparently to research the game's development. But let's be honest, they were probably going to clubs and then saying they were researching, you know?
Yeah. I wish we could do this at work, you know? Like going to the bars.
Oh, exactly. If only we made a bunch. Well, anyway, this was kind of crazy. So he actually watched videos of street bands, citing a specific video of a Kenyan band, which he said he watched 100,000 times.
Have you seen anything 100,000 times?
I mean, maybe like a short clip, but this must have been a long video.
I mean, I saw maybe Ninja Turtles 2 100,000 times.
Yeah.
That's a masterpiece, though.
It is. So in this video, what really drawn him to it was that the video started silent, and then it had a beat, dung, 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 and then instruments started to lay on top. So boom, 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 and it would get louder and louder until a full song was playing and a small crowd built up to join the band, and then they were all moving together. And so I want to talk about this because I feel like this video not only influenced Rez greatly, but also Space Channel 5. Though I have to wonder, because Rez came after Space Channel 5 Part 1, correct?
I think so, yeah. As long as I remember, because wasn't Space Channel 5 a 1999 game?
99 or late 99, yeah. It definitely was around there. So I find this interesting because this video really sounds like Space Channel 5, where it's like she's alone, and then people start joining her, and they go, la, 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 la. And there's even a track on the Space Channel 5 soundtrack of a single person singing, and then it builds up, and then it builds up. And so I have to wonder, is this a video he saw much earlier? It just seems like development-wise, it's like he's seeing something that influences Rez, but also is basically Space Channel 5. So I have to call into question this story.
I mean,
in terms,
if you're seeing it 100,000 times, I mean, maybe he started watching it in 1995, and by the time it was 2001, he finally got 100,000 views on it.
Maybe. I mean, I don't mean it's a cool story, but I don't mean to poke holes in it. But it just seems kind of weird that he would watch a video that would basically be Space Channel 5 after. I don't know. But how do you think that ties into Rez? What does that remind you of?
I mean, the game is literally a beat right when you start, right? In the first level, it's like a dun, yep. Very low, and then you start hitting the things, and then you start noticing, which if you start, right when I first started playing it, I was like, oh, it makes sounds when you shoot. Oh, and I didn't know, and it makes it really obvious in the beginning, and then I started understanding, the point of the game, what he was trying to go for. Right away, you didn't have to say a word. And I think that's pretty good. I mean, I guess what he experienced watching that video, he did a good enough job translating into Rez. Mm-hmm. I would say that I guess it worked out like he wanted.
Yeah, it fits perfectly with Rez and Space Channel 5. So if you're, trying to find a connection between those two, I think that's really what it is this building up and then this kind of explosion of music. It's just that Rez is much more of a what's the word I'm looking for? It's heady. I don't know.
It's on the tip of your tongue, and you.
Yeah. Well, it's like Kandinsky's work. If I heard jazz and I painted a picture of people playing instruments, that's one way to interpret it. But then when you hear music and then you just make all these shapes and colors, that's Rez. And yeah. Anyway, so this is interesting. So typically we cite old magazines, interviews, yada yada, wiki entries, but this is a rare case where Sega Talk is going to be referencing Segabit Swing and Report Show, and we'll get into that. So basically, in 1998 at Burning Man, Mizuguchi experienced what he saw in the Kenyan video for himself as he walked towards. Oh, here we go, 98. So this was happening before Space Channel 5. Mm-hmm. So he saw this. So the work on Rez was actually much earlier than 2001. It must have been 97, 98.
Yeah.
So you could almost consider Space Channel 5 as a precursor to Rez in that it was him probably testing out a lot of things. Anyway, he was walking towards the lights and the music, and then he became a part of the crowd as he got there. And it is also said that Mizuguchi came up with the game's name at the event. And we heard this story firsthand from gaming journalist and friend of the show and friend of Mizuguchi, Simon Cox. And this is from our September 2013 episode. That's so long ago.
Yeah, I know.
6 years ago.
We were so young back then.
I know, and this was the 50th episode of the Sega Bit Swing and Report Show. We were interviewing Francesca Reyes of the official Dreamcast magazine as a writer, Simon Cox, the official Dreamcast magazine editor-in-chief, and Ricardo Torres of CNET Game Center and former GameSpot editor-in-chief. And this episode, if you haven't heard it, definitely check it out. I think it's one of the best ones we did because it's the first and, to my knowledge, only time we assembled these people to talk, do a what are those things they do at the gaming conventions? Like 30 years later, let's talk about Streets of Rage with the developer. Yeah. And we were talking with the people behind Dreamcast Magazine. This is the first time they talked about the magazine since it came out. And I'm sorry to like string this out, but not many people have listened to this, and they really should because it's really good. So let's hear this story right now from Simon and Francesca and Ricardo.
And I mean, those are just some of my favorite memories. I mean, the other stuff was meeting Mizuguchi.
Yeah.
Like, I absolutely, totally respect that guy. I mean, such an incredibly nice guy, down to earth, but also super smart and super creative. I mean, I think, Simon would know more. Do you have a history, Simon, with Rez? Like, I've heard rumors about this, and I always wanted to ask you, did you actually, I don't know if you want to out this, but like, did you actually name that game or suggest the name for that game?
Yeah, I named it.
No.
Yeah.
Tell us the freaking story. Don't just say yeah.
Were you the mocap for the wireframe dude too?
That's right. That was me. Matt's floating through space. You know what? I went over there with some buddies from Edge, and we went to Japan, and we knew Mizuguchi from Edge, so we were already friends with him. And in fact, we went to Burning Man with him in '99. And I have an abiding memory of one night wondering where he got to and seeing these tiny little flashing lights coming towards me on the playa out of the dark. And as he walked up to me, I was like, oh my God, it's Tetsuya. And he had these like little lights on his shoes. And every time he walked, they would flash. Anyway, that's just a by the by. But he was... He was really into dance music. Obviously, I mean, you can tell from his work, that he's a big fan of electronic music, and so we went to Burning Man with him. We'd go clubbing with him in Japan. And one night, we went to meet him before we went out, actually at UGA as it was then, and he showed me this new game. And he showed myself and Jason Brooks, who was the ex-editor-in-chief of Edge. He showed us this new game. And the music that was playing for the level he showed us was a track by Underworld called Rez. Mm-hmm. And he said, I hope to get the license for this, but it's tricky. I'm trying, but I'm not sure if I can get the license for this track. And this track, Rez by Underworld, is a phenomenal kind of dance anthem, right? I mean, it's kind of a seminal dance anthem in a lot of ways, kind of like Moby's Go. And we were sitting there, and I said, do you have a name for the game yet? And he's like, no. And I'm like, why don't you call it Rez with a Z, like D-Rez, like resolution, rezzed up, like Tron, like, kind of all these things. And he said, oh, I really like that. Yeah, I really like that.
That's amazing.
And I was like, you could call it Rez, man. That's a great idea. That'd be great. That'd be so cool. It's our favorite track, and and if you can get the sound, if you can get the license for this track, that would be amazing. It would just be, my head would come off when I'm playing this game. And and he didn't get the license, unfortunately, for the track from Underworld, but he did keep the name Rez, which was cool. So I'm somewhere in the credits, I think, somewhere. But that's my little claim to fame. Yeah, right.
Oh, wow.
That's a great claim to fame, though, because that's a total cred.
It's a cred.
Booster.
That's true. It gets me some cred points, which I
get
back.
a T-shirt made. It's not real unless it's on a T-shirt.
That's true. I desperately need those cred points, so I'll take those. Right. Yeah.
You'll get cred points with 40-year-old dudes who remember Dreamcast.
Right, that's right.
Yeah. So, having heard that, George, and hearing ourselves with our little boy voices back then.
Our audio quality got better, I'll say that.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think about that story?
I mean, I remember when we heard it, I was a little. I was like, okay, so like, okay, how crazy was probably Burning Man in '98 that it inspired one of the one of your favorite games.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, I don't even know what to say. Like, I've never been to Burning Man, but now, like, when I heard him say that story, I was like,
Yeah.
maybe it's something you have to experience when you're there. And sometimes when
Yeah.
I always hear these things where, oh, I went to this event and we were feeling this way, and I got this great idea, this epiphany. And I heard we've heard people, we talked about them on the Swinger Report show, how they get epiphanies, right? I think it was, it's funny because the guy from Toe Jam and Earl, and I think something I read about Yu Suzuki, they both get them when they dream. They wake up and they get an epiphany and they write it down. This is have you ever had a great idea at a musical convention? Because to me, I'm like, oh, what's that? Or what's this? Oh, the music. And I never think about anything. So to me, the idea of being in this event with so many people and still thinking about work, that's so Japanese. That's the most Japanese thing I ever heard. But that's my take on the story. But what's your take on the story? Mine's totally different.
I mean, I thought it was fascinating at the time. And it totally fits. I know they're good friends. I also know we interviewed James Mielke, who worked with Q Entertainment on Child of Eden. So it kind of fascinates me that without even trying, we got them on the show, but it wasn't the intent to talk about Rez. But Mizuguchi, he has like all of these connections to people, and he just seems like a guy who is not sitting behind his computer making the latest game. He's out there talking to people, making connections. And it makes total sense looking at his games, especially Child of Eden, and even the plot of Rez, where it's about more than just your standard video game fare. It's a lot larger. It's about communities, people, interactions, the ways that we see and hear things. And from the sound of all the people who have met him and gotten to know him, he seems like a real personable guy. Which is something I feel we don't see much from Japanese developers.
I think we don't see that from developers, period. Like, not even in the West. Like, can you name in the last, like, 20... I mean, not 20 years, but, like, 5 years, the biggest hit games, like the new Spider-Man game. Can you name the guy that directed it? Can you name the guy that produced it? Like,
no.
So, like, I think we're getting to a point in video games where they're, like, a multi-billion-dollar industry where they don't want you to get too attached to a name, because once they become superstars, you have to pay these people, and most of them would rather. We saw that. Yeah, I mean, most of them would rather, like Hideo Kojima, just go and start their own studio when they get bullied around. Yeah, they don't want that because there's no negotiation with superstars. It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, for sure. So, I just think that's a really cool story, and I don't think many people have listened to the show. People have, but I feel like it should be like 1 million people and not what it is.
I know. There's some content where I'm like, so this guy's playing Minecraft and yelling really loud on the microphone and it got 20 million views. How does this happen? It is what it is.
And yet we were the guys that interviewed the creator of Floygan Brothers and the voice of Bubsy, and no one has talked to him for 20 years, and we're talking to him.
Yeah.
And we get like 5,000 people. But I like doing that. I'd rather do that than play Minecraft.
But we are going to be playing Minecraft soon, so guys. So.
We will, actually. That's the next episode. We're getting to your favorite part and my favorite part, and we're going to make some admissions here. So, Rez is famous, or perhaps infamous, for the trance vibrator. In an effort to enhance synesthesia, Mizuguchi had several experiments, including a proposed arcade version with a chair in which parts of the chair would vibrate around the player. Ugh. That didn't happen. And the PS2 version, he wanted the DualShock for haptic feedback, but he found the shaking to be too weak. He ended up working with ASC2 to create, or ASCII, to create a USB-powered haptic feedback device that you could hold, put in your pocket, or sit on. And the device was suggested to be a sex toy by fans in the gaming media. And to be fair, Sega never said it wasn't. So, did you ever experience the trance vibrator? And did you ever watch one of those videos? And you know which ones I'm talking about.
I did watch the videos. I mean, we were like, at this time, we were we were teenage. I mean, we like, what do you think we're gonna do? Like, we could have been doing a lot worse thing than watching video game accessory porn. Yeah, I've never experienced it myself. I played the game because of the stories that came out of this. So good job marketing, good job video game. And I'm pretty sure that the video game sites, and this was in there. It's so funny how video game news or journalism has changed so much. I remember in the early 2000s to mid 2000s, it was all about like trying to make sexy stories because like gamers would click on them, and they were kind of like borderline, I guess, sexist. Some of these stories, like the way, like they're basically trying to get teenage boys to click on them because they assume that's the highest. I mean, that's what gaming was, and I'm assuming me and our generation is the first. I guess we grew up our whole lives with video games. Yeah. So I could see why they were aiming like that, and I remember the stories of this, but I understand what Mizuguchi was trying to emulate. Like I told you, when you go to the concert and you get that really loud bass, there's some bands that literally just make noise so they could and to get that effect in your body, right? So
well, yeah, and you can get it in your body, you know.
Well, I've never used a res vibrator or trans vibrator, and that's another weird name for the project now, like trans vibrator. It would be like, can I use it? Or is this like, is this for just trans people, or is this for everybody?
Okay, I see.
No, I'm just saying, it's just weird. I never even thought about that back then. So
yeah,
I mean, yeah.
But I remember hearing about it. I remember reading the stories. I never experienced one, but I've always been looking out for them on eBay, and every time I see them, I'm like, nah, like. I feel like they've never dropped below like $40 to $60. Like they've always been in that price range where they're the price of a game, and you get the game, but it's the Japanese version for PS2, which you can't really play yourself. Plus the PS2 version is in America, so what's the point in importing it? So at the end of the day, I mean, it is what it is. I did watch the videos, but let's be honest, they weren't like that scandalous. I think if I remember the popular one, she was fully clothed. She put it down there and then just played the game. Yeah. Like there was no reacting. She wasn't like playing for the camera. Now, and we talked about this offline, but of all like the dirty Sega videos I've watched, everything comes back to Mizuguchi because there is that Space Channel 5 porn parody, Cosplay International, which I am not sad to admit that I watched the Space Channel 5 part. It's like watching a Filthy Frank video that turns into a porn.
Yeah, it's one of those like, it's like, oh, why does this exist? All right.
He wears a silver, this little Japanese man's wearing a silver suit and you can just see his face. And like the Green Man or whatever that is that he Filthy Frank plays.
And it's so funny that now companies want pornography of their characters because like Overwatch literally sold on just its porn parodies and people bought the game for some reason. Wow. And so other games, I forgot what it was. It was the guys that made Borderlands. They had another game that was trying to copy Overwatch. And the company, the publisher, made their own subreddit so people could post like porn of the characters and nobody did. It just came off as lame. So this is pretty ahead of its time, I guess, in marketing wise.
Yeah. Yeah. So... you know, good for them. Moving on. So the gameplay appeared simple, but a lot of development went into making everything seem just right. So players would fly through a stage and encounter enemies. Oh, this is the gameplay. We're finally getting into it. Finally. And they would paint enemies with the reticule, which is the little targeting scope. And even firing off beat, so if it was like doom, doom, and you went doom, shoot, doom, it appeared as though your shots were on beat. And this is a mechanic called quantizing. And this quantization went on to be used in later games that Mizuguchi worked on, including Lumines.
Yeah.
I always called it Lumines. And Child of Eden. I think it's Lumines, though.
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah,
I
think
called
was
it
just thinking
Lumines
like,
too, and then I think I saw some review online, and there was Luminous. That makes sense because it's about turning on the lights, basically, in the game. Right?
Luminous.
Yeah.
Oh boy, I'm learning so much today. So I mean, we can kind of get into quantization. I read about it. It doesn't really make much sense to me. My guess is though that it says here a bunch of technical music jargon, but they say the process results in notes being set on beats and on exact fractions of beats. So if you are off beat, when you push the button, the sound, I think the shot still goes off when you push the button, but the sound locks onto that half beat or that quarter beat. So it'll be like doom, 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 ding, doom, doom, ding, ding, doom. So it sounds like you're doing it even though you're just pushing the button.
Yeah.
And it's smart. I mean, it's something that people don't really notice, and I think they feel like they actually are on beat, and then they start playing on beat. It trains them to actually just do that. So I think that's cool. We don't have to discuss it anymore. You think it's cool? I think it's cool.
I think it's cool. I noticed when I played the games about that, but I didn't know how to explain it. It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you paint over them, it's like doom bop ha bop 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 boom, and so it does adjust a little to the music, but I don't think it breaks the gameplay. I think you're still shooting when you're shooting, which I think is really cool. So the audio, it's cool. I don't know, man. So the game's visuals, they transformed over time. The original idea was a living Kandinsky painting. And later he considered hip-hop culture and was actually inspired by the aesthetics of the band Gorillaz with a Z. Interesting that Rez has a Z.
Yeah.
And he also considered the history of life and evolution. The avatar for the game changed from a spaceship to a woman running to a race car. And thanks to Katsumi Yokota of Panzer Dragoon fame and Tekken Concrete. Have you seen that, the anime movie?
No, I've never seen it, no.
Yeah, again, Gorillaz I was really into as a kid. Tekken Concrete was one of those early animes that I picked the Blu-ray or the DVD up for. It's good. You should check it out. It's very... it reminds me of Jet Set Radio, actually. And the music's really awesome. But the visual style of those games and media came from Katsumi, and that's where the game's visual style came together. So thanks to someone assisting him with the visuals and the graphics, there was a focus on darkness in the individual moving into light and community, and the concept of evolution was also included through the use of primitive oceanic forms, which I think actually were a lot of the enemies. So what are your opinions on these early ideas and what we got?
Well, Gorillaz, I mean, visually, I would actually love to see a cartoon Gorillaz rail shooter rhythm game. I think it would be freaking cool. I really like the Gorillaz anime style, and I was looking at this, what's it called, Tekken Crete?
And
it looks like Gorillaz sort of. I mean, it has its own art style, but as for it changing from a spaceship makes sense. What we got was basically a flying AI, and then when you talked about evolution, it totally makes sense that you're basically in a machine, and the machine is becoming sentient or something, right? Is that the yeah? So all this makes sense, and he did use aspects of it and gave it his own twist. As I would love for it to be like a painting. I always wanted to see a game that's like a watercolor painting, but I feel like the Dreamcast probably was not the best console for that, and I'm pretty sure that's why the graphics changed to wireframes and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. Have you ever seen a game that looks like a painting come to life? I'm trying to think. I understand we have 2D games where even say, I mean, I'm trying to think of the game like Dragon. What's like the studio that's owned by Atlas or Vanillaware that does all those like Odin Sphere and even Okami. Oh, Okami's probably the closest one to be honest with you.
Yeah,
but it's like cell shaded.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Okami maybe a little bit, but yeah, I can't really think of many. I'm sure there's some more artsy games out there, and maybe even ones we're not thinking of that are actually like people are screaming at their
Cuphead. I mean, it's 1920s, but it's not a painting. So yeah.
Yeah. Something I thought was interesting was that they never really nailed down a main character, and I still think they didn't because as you know, the game you evolve into all these different avatars, and so like the cover of the American release for PS2 has the silver guy. The cover of the Japanese cover has actually the thing you shoot, so it doesn't have the main character on the cover. And on the back, it actually shows the circle and the guy and the other version of the guy and the third version of the guy and then the like disco ball and then the like crazy final form. And then I think there's a baby too, right?
Yeah, I was going to tell you, like, I remember looking at the cover of the game, and I don't know if you had this because there's different covers, but like, it doesn't look interesting, the game. When you look at it, you're like, oh, okay, cool. If you didn't know anything about the game and you went in the store and you saw it as a kid or a teenager, you'd be like, should I get this game or this really cool-looking Jet Set Radio game or Crazy Taxi or House of the Dead 2 or Virtual Fighter?
Right.
And that one is just shapes. It's like, oh, okay. If you don't know anything about it, it's weird, right?
I don't think Rez actually ever had a really good cover.
No.
Maybe the PS4 version, but then that was kind of ruined by all the boxes telling you to buy VR headsets. So moving on.
Yeah, moving on.
Let's get into the story. So the story of Rez is hard to put into words. If you've played the game, you probably have your own interpretation. So very quickly, just spit out what you thought the story was.
I just thought it was a sentient being, and you're playing as it, and as the challenges come at you, you're basically breaking out of a controlled man-made system. Kind of like, I don't know if you watched Westworld. That's kind of what I thought it was trying to convey. Yeah. Maybe I'm 100% wrong. I didn't really read too much into it. That's just what I assumed it was. Maybe I'm wrong on this one.
I saw it as you logging into a computer and you were taking out the the bugs and stuff, so, kind of like the show Reboot.
So you're like a virus scanner, kind of.
Yeah, and then things start to become self-aware. That's how I saw it. But the actual plot. So here's what the actual plot was. So the game is set in a futuristic computer super network called the K Project. So there's the original name for the game, the working title, with Kandinsky finding his way in there, where much of the data flow is controlled by an AI named Eden. Eden has become overwhelmed with the amount of knowledge gathered on the network after a virus infects her, causing her to doubt her existence and enter a shutdown sequence, which would create a catastrophic problem everywhere she would be able... This is a little weird. I copy-pasted it, sorry. Which, catastrophic problems everywhere should she be able to complete this. The player plays the protagonist Virus.
Swazak. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, Swayze, like Patrick Swayze.
Yeah.
The same that infected Eden earlier, invading Eden's mainframe and battling the mainframe's defense system to reveal the true being at Eden's core. Whoa. Now, if you thought Super Monkey Ball's plot was weird,
yeah,
this is... I don't know. I mean, we could go on forever. I don't want to break this thing down. It is what it is. I get it, I guess. But the big thing is that Mizuguchi has said that the ending of the game and the message, "Who am I?" is a realization that the player is not a hacker, but a sperm, and that Rez is the story of conception set against an AI backdrop.
So we were sperm the whole time.
We were sperm the whole time, man. Playing Rez, playing Seaman, man.
Is this a tie-in to Seaman, where you also play sperm?
It's the prequel.
Ah, can't wait to do a Seaman episode. By the way, we're gonna.
I know, me too.
I was just
That's
thinking
gonna be
about
great.
that.
Yeah. Wow. So,
what are my thoughts?
What are you,
I don't even know what to say, dude. Like, it was so weird. Like, there's other games where I'm like, I played them growing up, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was cool. And then we come back and we talk about the story, and we're like, wait, what? What?
Yeah.
I didn't get that at all. The one
Yeah.
that was like that was Virtual Fighter, which we covered in the Sega Talk episode, and it was like federal Japanese. It was like some weird like underground people and like all these like I didn't get that at all. Sorry, I just played the game because it had cool fighting guys in it.
Right.
This one it was for the music, obviously the cool visuals, not story. Obviously, there's a reason I think they didn't put an emphasis on it, but it is kind of, if you want to look into it and you want to be deep, there is some deepness there.
do.
So, what's your thoughts on this?
I mean, that's kind of, I get it. I see the connections. That's kind of clever. That I think that's the whole point. That's why when I was reading through the plot, I just kind of didn't really care what I was saying, because I think in the end, the whole notion of the mainframe and you were the virus and this and that, it was all kind of a cover for this whole story of conception set against an AI backdrop. And when you see that, it was like the thing going in and infecting it, but then becoming a part of it. That's like the sperm going in and inseminating the egg, and then it suddenly becomes a part of the womb. And then the computer mainframe is the mother, and the virus was originally a virus, is now a child. So, and then the game Child of Eden, that's the sperm. That's the baby.
That's actually, now that game makes a lot more sense. Now actually,
doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I was like, even the name makes sense, right? Child of Eden. Yeah.
And so Child of Eden, really, Eden is the network, which is Res, within Res, the game, and the child is you. You're the child. You were the sperm in Res, and now you're the Child of Eden. So there you go. Let's talk about the music. So the music, it's been really prevalent throughout this whole discussion, but I thought we'd dig into it a little bit more. So from the start, Rez's concept was using music to draw players into the game. Several genres were considered, and the idea was to find one that would evoke primal responses and synesthesia. And in the end, techno and electronic dance music was decided on because of the digital nature, allowing the team to isolate sounds and alter timing, as we've discussed earlier in Chapter 1 of our discussion of Res, when we discussed quantization. And if you open your textbooks to page 394...
I was going to say, am I supposed to be studying this?
Yeah, if you open your textbooks to 394... No, so I asked if we thought any other music could work. I don't think it could.
No.
I think this makes sense.
Like, think about it. Like, can you imagine heavy metal music or anything? No.
So I think it's smart. And the team's musician, named EBZ, used placeholders by Fatboy Slim and Underworld, while music coordinator Masakazu Hiroishi set up meetings with Mizuguchi and European techno artists including Cold Cut, Adam Freeland, and Aphex Twin. And it took months to match the music to the stages and visuals. Often the music would alter the visuals, and the visuals would alter the music. In the end, what are our favorite music tracks of Res, and would we listen to Res outside of the game as a soundtrack?
Well, I'll let you start this one, because I mean, there's a different. Isn't there a different soundtrack for Infinite? Like, didn't they add music to it too?
I think they might have had one new track for the new area, but all in all, it was the same soundtrack.
Okay.
I really liked the Adam Freeland track for the last stage, Area 5. It's Fear.
Okay.
And Fear is the Mind Killer.
I think that's a really popular track, right? I mean, like, All Said, right? Like, the Butterfly Effect is another one I think I always hear. And Singularity, I'm trying to remember. X, I think, or Y?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, those are, like, pretty... I mean, go on. Sorry.
No. I was just saying that Fear the Mind Killer remix, you can listen to the MP3 of it, but it's actually not like the game version because they cut up the music and made it work for the level. As we said, the level would influence the music. Music would influence the level. So it wasn't beneath them to go in and cut these tracks up and make them work. So if you actually listen to the soundtrack of this, it's not going to seem the same as what you remember from the game, which is why fans actually went out and have made remixes, and we actually have one hosted on our site. I think the MP3 is still there. It is, yeah. From 2015, a fan recreated the unreleased res edit of Adam Freeland's Fear.
Yeah.
That's a lot of words. And this song is really important to me, and this game really came together as one of my favorites because of Area 5. I mean, playing through it, I thought there were a lot of cool moments. But there's this part where you're going, and the music's, it's like that dun, dun, that beat. And then it starts building, and then there's this crescendo, and you go into space. And you're looking down on space, and then all of these things are coming in and, like, attacking the planet or going into them. And throughout this entire game, you're in a little computer simulation, and all of a sudden, I've never experienced this in a game before, I was brought to this massive level of flying into outer space and looking down on it. And the music and the visuals just work together so well that it's a very... I think I don't know if I experienced synesthesia, but I got the tingles.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I got this... And I usually don't get so like talking about my emotions with games like this. I don't think. Maybe I do. But in this case, this is a very distinct memory I have of playing a video game, and feeling something so strong from a specific moment that's not like a character dying or something like that. Like, I don't care when characters die in video games, to be honest. But like this, just like this moment, this crescendo of music and the visuals, it just did something to me, and I still experience that when I play the game. But I kind of have to earn it.
Yeah.
Like, I have to play through the whole game to get to it. I can't just jump in or watch a playthrough. It doesn't really do it.
I mean, as the music, you basically beat me. I mean, you had a tingling moment. I don't really get tingling moments as much as other people. Like you said, I think it depends on the aspect. There's some games where you play it and I'm like, oh, that was a good game. That was a good game. And then I come back to the game later, and then I play it, and I remember the day I played it. Like, I remember, like, playing Super Mario World when I had chickenpox, like that. Like, that's what I remember, like, the times. This game is one of those weird games where I played it, I was like, oh, this is a pretty cool rail shooter. It isn't my favorite rail shooter, and I think it's gotten way more popular. I do think the soundtrack is what makes the game, as we spoke about this in the past. Mm-hmm. If it wasn't for this music, I don't think the game would have been that popular. I think there's like a fan base of people, and one of the questions you asked was, would I listen to this without the game? And yeah, I would. I mean, I'm not a big electronic fan like you are, and I'm probably, if I asked you right now, Barry, would you listen to this solo? You'd probably say, I already listened to it. I don't need permission.
Yeah, I already listened to it.
Yeah. There's like some very strange tracks. Like, I remember some that like titles that stuck up to me is like Rock is Sponge. It's very like Japanese. Just like, I think the visuals with the soundtrack really do make a big difference for the thing and how you interact with the game with the music playing in the background.
Right.
And when you listen to it solo, it works. So It's kind of this weird effect where you're like, I didn't think it was going to work solo. And then you actually listen to the soundtrack. You're like, actually, it did work pretty well, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I give this game a lot of props. And, I'm kind of I am kind of ashamed. I have not bought the vinyl version of this yet. And you could buy it on, I forget what site they teamed up with. It's like, it's not a limited run games version.
No, it's
like,
IM
what's
8-bit.
It called? I am 8-bit. There you go. Even though the game's not 8-bit, but let's go message them on Twitter and make fun of it. But
yeah, we should.
But yeah, they do cost. It costs pretty. I think it's like $60 or 40 or something.
Mm.
But yeah, I need to pick that up. I'm probably gonna pick it up soon because I don't have it, and I have like a lot of Sega soundtracks on vinyl.
Yeah,
it has to be added into it.
It would
now
sound
that I
great.
think about it.
I think it would.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think you're right. Like this game without the visuals and music and concept behind it, people don't really talk about like, oh, the enemy wave patterns and state. Because I've seen people who play shmups and even rail shooters, and they'll gush over the gameplay and the enemy patterns and this and that, and I can't really connect with them on that. I understand what they're going for, but it's not my thing. But I never hear people really talk about this game like that. Not even Panzer Dragoon, really. People aren't like, oh yeah, the stage progression and enemy waves and the leveling system and the weapons. You hear that a lot with Orta, which I think not only is a beautiful game, but also is a great rail shooter. I think this game it is a really good rail shooter, but it's not like, I don't know. It's not that crazy. Like, the enemies aren't that varied.
To me, like when you're saying this, it's like the way I could describe it is Misaguchi was at a point in his life where he wanted to make games for everybody. Mm-hmm. So when you have these like hardcore, like, oh man, that game was hard. Like, I don't feel like Rez was hard. I feel like anybody could enjoy it. Like, you could be a electronic music fan and just play it for the sound, or you could be I like rail shooters, so I'm playing this after a hard day at work,
right,
to relax. That's what he's trying to make, relaxing games. Even Space Channel 5, it was aimed at pop stars. Like, they're trying to make Ooh La La pop star. They're trying to like push it to women that would not play games usually. Mm-hmm. So he was doing, I guess he was the out of the box Sega creator, where he was trying to reach a mainstream audience that like Nintendo wants to reach nowadays.
Oh, absolutely. I agree totally.
Yeah.
And let's complete his journey, shall we? So Rez was unveiled on June 26, 2001. So actually that's pretty close to the date we're recording now. What was that, 2 weeks ago? And at a Sony event. So despite the game releasing to Dreamcast and PS2 in Japan, Mizuguchi wanted to focus on the PS2 because he felt a lack of support for Rez, probably on the Sega side, on the Dreamcast side. And so he felt like he needed to lean more on Sony and the PlayStation 2 version to get more support for the game. And his presentation had him with newly bleached hair, playing the game and not saying a word. He wanted the game to speak for itself. And Sega and Sony executives at this event loved what they saw, with the Sony Computer Entertainment chairman and former Sony Music president Shigeo Maruyama suggesting that Rez would not only make, but change history for music and games. Sega and Sony worked together to develop marketing for the game, and both the PS2 and Dreamcast versions released on November 22nd, 2001. And it was brought to my attention that the Japanese ads for this are very weird, and they are. It has like two men with their shirts off with vibrating sounds, and a guy, a guy in a bathroom, pounding on the wall, and then he gets on beat with the person pounding on the wall, and they start doing this like Rez music, and they punch holes through it. So it's a lot of like naked men looking at each other, and the tagline is "Open New Sense." So. Yeah.
That would have sold copies right there.
Yeah, right. So I wanted us to briefly discuss Mizuguchi's journey. I know in the planning for this, you kind of likened him to Yu Suzuki. And so I wanted you to kind of expand on your thoughts on that. Why would you say that? Why? How dare you?
Because, I mean, I'm not saying that he's has the long career at Sega of like Yu Suzuki. Yu Suzuki has like, he started in 86 and he went all the way to like 2002, and every couple years at least he had a international hit in arcades.
Right.
Misaguchi was different. He was more of all right, let's give him a couple $1 million or $1 million, and then he pulls out this project that's small, simple, minimalistic, but it has a goal in mind, and it's I guess it's a marketable. I think Space Channel 5 was more marketable than this game, because this game, like he said, I'm just gonna play it and you should know what it is. And I feel like to sell Rez to somebody, you have to experience it,
right?
Because selling it, there's no main character. Like, they could have easily changed the whole game and put like an anime girl and probably sold way more copies and tie it into some franchise. But they did, and they stripped it down. It's minimalistic. I feel like he's I don't know. It's so weird. It kind of reminds me too of Yuji Naka.
Yeah.
At this time period where he was taking lead on like Choo Choo Rocket, all these minimal, low budget games. They remind me of like modern indie games where they're like trying to be more deep,
Right.
with simplistic gameplay over it. So yeah, that he just reminds me of Yu Suzuki because of, he was basically a rock star at the time. That's why, too.
That makes sense. No, I totally buy that. I was giving you a hard time.
Sorry.
I agree. It's interesting, though. He was only with Sega for 13 years, and you look at his trajectory, and you compare that to Yu Suzuki, who, I mean, it's not to say, but Yu Suzuki was there for like 20... I mean, he's still there, technically, but he was there all our lives, basically. When we were born, up until...
Yep.
And he's still in an advisor role. It's interesting, though, because you look at Yu Suzuki, Yuji Naka, and Mizuguchi, and all three of them have essentially left Sega, formed their own studios to varying degrees of success. I'd say Mizuguchi... I think Q Entertainment has actually been the most successful of all of them.
Yeah.
I think Prope, obviously, that's kind of done. That's gone. I think it still exists, but it's a one-man business. Usenet, Yu Suzuki's thing. That's
around.
It's around. Shenmue 3 is a YSNet game, but it was a lot of mobile games. I think only like 2 or 3 games actually came out of his whole thing there, and they were all Shenmue related. So yeah, I'd say Mizuguchi, despite Q Entertainment folding in 2014, or at least he left it. I don't know if Q Entertainment's around anymore.
I think the last time I heard is that they sold it to a Chinese company or something, and they were going to make a mobile game, and then he came out on Twitter and said, I have nothing to do with this mobile game. I think he left the company, and I think he's part of Enhanced Games now. I think where they're doing Rez, and they did the new, I think, Luminous.
Yeah, and Enhance is his company, so that's kind of like his Prope or his YSNet.
And it's funny because I feel like Enhanced already is more popular than Prope ever was. Like,
oh yeah,
because they tried to do that whole like Let's Play or Let's Dance or what was it? Let's Tap. There you go. And it was alright. It was a cool concept, but like I don't know, it just didn't hit. Like I feel like Luminous is probably the biggest game made by a creator at Sega that left when they went third party.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, despite the game's success, there was never a true sequel, probably because he left Sega in 2003. But Mizuguchi did create the spiritual successor called Child of Eden through his own company, and Rez saw re-releases with Rez HD and Rez Infinite. Now, I did say spiritual successor, but looking back, I feel like it probably is just a straight-up sequel, because he does own the rights to Rez. It's just not called Rez 2. So, there's that. But 2000...
He could have called it. He could have called it Res 2, High Res.
High Res, Low Res, Res Squared.
Yeah.
In 2007, Res HD saw Mizuguchi getting the license back from Sega for a Xbox Live Arcade HD remake, and the game saw a physical release bundled with Lumines and E4, and the release was called Cubed, and it was kind of a Q Entertainment compilation. And it was published by Atari, of all studios. And
I did not know this thing existed. I have to buy it now. After
it's good. This. Like I have it. I'm holding it. I'm holding it up, and it's
showing it off.
It's nice. I mean, it's a great compilation of his work. Has Luminous Live, Every Extend, Extra Extreme, and Res HD. So it's kind of like the final versions of these. Well worth getting, especially if you like your games physical like I do. And then moving on, Res Infinite was far more ambitious. It released to the PS4, PSVR, Windows, and Android. And this version runs in 1080p and features a new level called Area X, which offered a 360-degree shooting and free movement. And Infinite is intended to be a VR game first and foremost, but a VR headset is not mandatory. Which kind of reminds me of, what was it, Child of Eden, because that was really being pushed as a Kinect title and a PS Move title. And then they're like, but you don't need to play it with those. And it's like, well, we don't want to play it with those. We want to play it with the controller, just like Res. And so I think they kind of got smart with Res Infinite. It's still an amazing VR experience from what I've heard. There's like a full bodysuit version or something like that. but it still gives you the base experience. Yeah.
I have a PlayStation VR, and one of the demos that came when I bought it was Rez was in it, which is kind of odd. Because you think that Sony has their own things to push.
Yeah.
And every single time because it's the level where the boss is that thing that runs, and then he runs ahead of you and behind you.
Yeah.
And then there's a point where everybody, when they put on the headset, they're like, "Oh, in behind me," and I'm like, "Turn around," and they turn around 360, and they're like, "Oh my god, you can see behind you." That amazes people in the game. So I always see them all shocked, like, "Oh my god, you can see all the way around you," like just turning around. But yeah, this game is perfect for that effect for sure.
That's funny. Yeah, I've got to try that. The Wikipedia entry for Res Infinite was like, it's seen as the best PSVR game. And I'm like, where's your source for that? I mean, I don't doubt it, but it's just kind of funny.
It really tells you the state of VR where, like, it's an add-on, so nobody really wants to put too much money into it.
Right,
and
right.
then the ones that do, you're like, oh, it's a good game. It's an old game. It's a good game.
Right.
But it's the best one on VR, so it's the best, basically. It's like, kind of like Kinect. You had Kinect, right? You played a game where you're like, this is pretty good. It's a little janky, but it's the best on Kinect, so I suggest you play it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I feel like with a lot of gamers and their like,
Is
I
that
don't know,
air
accessories,
quotes?
it has to be like 100% perfect, or they just throw it out the window and shit on it. And it's unfortunate because I do think there are some really fantastic Kinect games, mainly by Sega people, I'll be honest. And people just don't give it a chance because, Kinect, it sucks. And I'm like, well, it's not taking over. And now it's dead. So you can go back and enjoy the games without being afraid that Kinect's going to take over your life.
Your world.
Your world.
I don't want to get up when I'm playing games.
Exactly.
My knees hurt.
I can't get up. But Res Infinite was developed under a one-man studio, so that's what Enhanced Game is. It's just him, and everything else was outsourced. Yeah. So
it's kind of funny that you could actually do that now.
Yeah.
Because like Shenmue 3, remember they did all those Kickstarter updates where they're outsourcing it, and I never really thought about that, but like it has to be a lot easier to come up with concepts and have other people do your ideas nowadays, right?
Oh, for sure.
Just outsource it.
And there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, Sonic Mania was really just a bunch of different people. None of them were Sega employees. None of them were really on their own team. Now they are. But it's interesting. It's a great way to do things, if I'm honest, because then you can get the best people, and they're not committed for like another 10 years to work at your studio. At the same time, you lose people because they go their separate ways, and it's hard to get them back for a sequel. But it's interesting. The advances in VR was actually what brought Mizuguchi back to gaming, and between his time with I think Res HD and now, he was actually working on mobile games and working as a teacher. So that's
oh my god, can you imagine being a Japanese student and having him as a teacher? Just walks out with electronic music blaring,
and his white hair, and he just starts going.
Talks about his days at Burning Man while he smokes a cigarette indoors. Because
He smokes one of those funny cigarettes that make people goofy.
Marijuana, they call it.
So since release, Res has been met with high praise both by critics and by those in the gaming industry. The game has made Time magazine's 100 greatest video games of all time list, and ranked at number 22 on the SegaBit's Top 100 Sega Games list.
Wow, that's pretty high.
It is. And while highly influential, no game has truly surpassed Res, not even Mizuguchi's own games. There is so much that can be said about Res that we probably didn't get to. So what else do we want to say? What do we think we missed?
Probably we should have played the trans vibrator and like, I don't know. I think we need to make a whole video. I'm probably going to make a video on the trans vibrator. I'm going to order the trans vibrator and make a long form video on it. But you said experiences with the re-releases on here.
Yeah.
I don't know we're going to get to that, but like I played the Dreamcast one. I played the PS2 one. I played the 3. So I played them all.
Yeah.
I don't own the VR one. I like I told you, I haven't bought anything for my 8-bit. I've been to their store. It's like, isn't it kind of weird that Enhanced Games didn't put this game physically in stores, but they signed a contract with IM 8-bit, but it's always the same price. So I haven't picked it up yet, but I want to.
Yeah, but same here.
But as the best one, I would say that so far the VR really does make a difference if you want to experience a game like that in a new way. And it kind of makes me wish that Sega would just re-release games like House of the Dead or Virtual Cop and just add VR as a gimmick for a reason to re-release these games.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because don't make it you have to have VR. I mean, make it optional. But the idea that you get a new collection of these classics with an added function, it's kind of like a no-brainer in my opinion. But yeah, I'm glad Mr. Gucci got into it, and I'm actually happy that we got the re-release on PS4. Just might as well just re-release it on everything. Just put it on the Switch, on the Xbox One.
That would work.
Why not?
That would work for me. As for me, I think we covered a lot here. I actually wanted to cover just about everything we could, just because I don't foresee us coming back to Res. There's no sequels. It's not like we're going to do a Res HD episode in 5 years or something like that. So I hope we hit everything. I think the music, I can't really speak to the specific tracks, like the artists and stuff. I don't really know much about them. But I don't think you should really get into all that, really. It's just the music that they created that was used in this game. That's the important part. And there's a lot too, and if it sounds like I had trouble getting my thoughts together, it's because a lot of this game, it can't be put into words. It's a lot of feelings.
It's very hard to market. Like you told us right now, right? Like the commercials were just strong men. Like, what does it have to do with the game? But it's like, if they tasked you as a advertiser, what would you make the game?
No.
Just a girl using the trans vibrator?
Maybe I'll go watch that video after we wrap this up. But before we wrap this up, so you can support us on Patreon. You would get this episode about 3 or 4 days earlier than anyone else. We also have a lot of other content on there. There's audio versions of all of our videos, so that's for you too. You can click on over to patreon.com/Segabits to check that out. And again, too, if you're at a certain tier, you get to tell us what games to cover. And you also get not only priority, but we're only going to be reading, at least for the time being, comments from people on our Patreon about the game we talk about. So it's sparse, but I'm going to read them. So we have Daniel, and here's his memories on the game. I never played it.
Great memories on the game.
But it looks awesome. I love the design of the game. So you should check it out, Daniel. There's a lot of different platforms to play the game on now. If you have PS4, Xbox 360, Dreamcast, PS2, it's out there. And it's waiting for you.
Get a vibrating chair and play it.
Bad Sonic says, I had loved this game. The use of music, graphics, and the Rumble Pack was extremely unique, but I never finished it. You need to finish it because Area 5 will give you the brain tingles. And so, from all of us here at Sega Talk, myself and George, thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with another game, maybe Snail Maze or something. We'll see.
Ooh, Snail Maze, Moonwalker maybe.
Ooh, you can walk backwards. Right.
Ooh, bye. Bye.